Today on The Nation Speaks, how to stay positive when the news cycle is so negative. Small businesses fight back against lockdown measures. Hello and welcome to The Nation Speaks. I'm your host, Cindy Teichroew. Whatever your political views, if you watch the news, it's hard not to get emotionally involved. And these days, those emotions tend to be mostly negative. But don't despair, help is here. So joining us is Dr. Robi Ludwig. She's a psychotherapist and an award-winning reporter, so she can speak to both aspects of this topic. Dr. Robi, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So there's a lot of, I would say, not just negative news these days, but a lot of negativity in the news.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very strong words on both sides. We all know there was this unprecedented violence at the Capitol, now the impeachment of the president and all of the rhetoric around that, which is itself further fanning the flames that led to that violence in the first place. From a mental health perspective, what impact is this having on people who are actually watching the news?
Well, the news has changed in the last 10 years, so it's hard to get away from. We have our phone alerts, so we get messages on an ongoing basis. We have television 24/7, and it's very sensationalistic. So we're drawn to see what's going on. It's almost like a reality show on steroids, but it's real. And there's a lot of divisiveness that's going on. So one station will portray a situation one way, and then another station will say something else. And people are really politically divided. And politics really has a lot to do with one's identity. So when people are watching television, they're feeling anxious, their cortisol is up, and it can increase depression. Seeing certain images on the screen can also cause post-traumatic stress disorder and just a basic sense of negativity. So it's viewing the world in a negative way, which is not something we really want for people.
So what do you suggest to people? This is the reality. We may not be able to change the way the news is presented, but what can you suggest to people? How do they even know that they're reacting, in a negative way to what they're seeing?
It's a really good question. If you're watching the news and you feel that you're walking away with a feeling of irritability or anger or sadness, now this can happen on social media as well, it might be a signal to change the way you're interacting with the news. So it doesn't mean don't watch the news. You want to get your information, but not be glued 24/7, because there is something about that repetition that can cause us to see the world in a negative way. So get your news and then do something that's positive. Maybe look for positive news that's out there. That certainly is a new trend that we're starting to see. Even exercising right after you watch the news or read something negative can be helpful. Start a positive text chain with people that you really enjoy. Make sure that there is a balance, and also question yourself. How is this news impacting me? Do I need to interact with the news differently? Because it only takes 14 minutes to watch a segment and have it impact you, both in a positive way and in a negative way. And with news that's negative, it tends to get us to see the world as hopeless. We see more differences than similarities. And it also gets us to see the world in just this negativistic way that can't be changed. And that's not accurate either.
It's interesting that you make the analogy to reality TV, because reality TV, of course, is edited to show you the most sensational, interesting parts. And actually the news is the same. Even though you're on the spot, you're only seeing, certain parts. It's selected what you see, who's being spoken to. And it might be good for people to realize that too.
You bring up such a good point, that the news is designed to raise extreme emotions in us. And so it's designed to be highly emotive. And the other important fact to keep in mind is that some news is a bit more gossipy in an erudite way. So it's really just one person's opinion that you might like hearing or you don't like to hear. And then there's just straight news. So it's important for the viewer to educate themselves and know the difference between somebody who is sharing an opinion in a gossipy way, although perhaps very eloquently, and someone who is just sharing the straight news.
And so what about in interpersonal relationships? I feel like now, in the past, perhaps it was more possible to break bread with somebody, of different political views. And it seems like that's becoming harder because the messaging is that people have a different view than you, are bad people, are dangerous people. How would you help people deal with that situation?
Yeah, so one of the problems about politics in the news is people are feeling offended and they're finding a news program that just gives them their own perspective. And a good question to ask yourself is it possible that I'm wrong? I think that's a really good question for everyone to ask because it moves us from this idea that every thought we have is right and then seeking out news or groups of people who support that one idea. I would say know the audience. If you feel bringing up politics is going to cause harsh and just unfortunate interactions, don't do it. There used to be a time that they said, don't talk about politics or religion. We might be going back to that time. But I think it's important to listen and just be curious about what other people have to say instead of always needing to be right, because probably there's a little bit of right in the middle if we just listen.
All right, so that's a really good tip, the asking yourself, could I be wrong? Do you have any other good tips like that we can give to people?
Yeah, to ask yourself, how is this making me feel? And listen, if you find scrolling on Instagram makes you feel inferior, don't do it. Take a break. I think it's important for people to know that they don't need to be on Facebook if it's making them unhappy. They can eliminate an app if they feel that they're getting sucked in. You have to remember, a lot of the negativity really does bring us back. We seek it out because it's exciting. There used to be a term called, if it bleeds, it leads. And so we are also contributing. If we keep watching and looking, then that's what's going to be provided. So take a break, take a mental health day. And if you really feel that you're depressed and anxious and feeling irritable with those around you, ask yourself what you can do differently, because you don't have to feel that bad. There's positive news out there. And I think people are trying to find and seek that positive news, in part because it gets us to feel that good deeds and good acts can make a difference. And it gets us to see people as more similar than dissimilar. We see the human condition and how we're all more alike than not alike, which is always good to remember. So I think we can take control of what we're viewing if we know that the news has an impact both in a positive way and negative way. Stay informed, but observe your feelings, and you can take actions to make sure that you're getting more of a balanced view of the world. What's also changed about the news and what makes it so relatable is that we're seeing the news almost in real time. So we're getting footage from people who are on the scene, and it just feels that much more relatable, if you will, and it's registering in a different way. And so we have to understand all of these factors are impacting us, and that we need to be proactive about our mental health and realize, get your information and then step away. Ask yourself, how is this impacting me? If it's having a good impact, great. If it's having a negative impact, then give yourself a time limit. Again, we all want to be knowledgeable about what's going on, but we don't have to hear negative news from our phone, from our TV, from social media. That's a bit overwhelming, and it does get us to see the world in a negative way, and that's simply not true. There are always dark times. There are always difficult things going on in the world: war, famine, racism, difficult politics. But there are also great strides that are happening as well. So it's important, if we don't see that going on in the media, to remind ourselves of that fact.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that's actually very helpful. So I hope people get something out of it. Thank you.
I hope so too. It's good to be mentally healthy and to take care of your emotional well-being.
Absolutely. And coming up after the break, a bar owner in Minnesota has had it with lockdowns, and she's not alone. But first, here's America Q&A.
Oh, absolutely. We just got Tesla, like Elon Musk moved over here. Like, it's a great time to be Texas.
I love it that it's more conservative.
Texas is a state of people, and it's all about them.
I work in a medical facility where I have a very high risk of contracting COVID, and going out in the community and seeing that people aren't wearing masks or observing social distancing makes me very upset.
No, I mean, I like New York. The rest of the country I find I don't really like so much. I mean, the constant war between the city and the rural people, between the sort of the moralists and the libertines, I don't really think it's such a good life.
Happy is not the right word to use at the moment, but I would say I'm content, but waiting for a better time.
What's not to like? The weather, the economy's great.
I like the people, I like the weather, I like the friendliness, I like the quality of life.
There's a lot of stuff that goes on that doesn't really apply to me, and I feel like it should apply to me, especially as like an African American in the South. So for me, I don't think this is somewhere I'd stay.
I love Georgia. Yeah. I've lived here for over 35 years.
There have been some times where it's been, a little racist. But overall, it's pretty peaceful as far as crime rate, at least the area that I live in.
It's got the big city, which is Atlanta and Atlanta Metro. But it's also got North Georgia with the mountains, and it's got the coastal area, Savannah, Brunswick, and then it's got South Georgia, which is like the farming and the flatlands.
I miss the ocean. I used to live in California, but I like the history of the state.
I am happy with how things are going right now. I think things could get better, but just because we're not so strict here.
Currently, I am thankful to be living here all my life, and seeing the responses and the measures taken to keep the community safe have been good.
Happy. Wow. It's a beautiful place. I love California. I think that our leadership should lead by example. I mean, I would love to go to the French Laundry, but I can't go to a restaurant.
I love California. I've never been anywhere else, so I couldn't compare it to anything. This is all I know.
Welcome back. It's now been 10 months since the pandemic sparked lockdowns across the country. Last March, we were told 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and most businesses cooperated without complaint. But the ongoing restrictions since then have taken a toll on all of us. In Minnesota, some businesses decided they'd had enough and would fight back against the state. And joining us today is Lisa Monet. She's the owner and operator of Alibi Drinkery, a sports bar in Lakeville, a suburb of Minneapolis. And Darius Teichroew, he's the founder of Reopen Minnesota Coalition. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So Lisa, I'd like to start with you. Tell me if this is right. Like the rest of the country, Minneapolis, Minnesota went into full lockdown in mid-March. Then in June, outdoor dining was allowed, and then indoor dining at 50% capacity, then closing at 10 p.m. All of that until finally on November 20th, Governor Tim Walz ordered another full lockdown. And that ultimately lasted a month, but before the end of that, you decided to reopen completely. And as a result, you're facing a legal battle, which could land you in jail. You're facing fines, losing your food and liquor licenses. So let me just ask, before I want to get into why you decided to fight after complying for all those months, but let me just backtrack a little bit and ask you first, what was the impact on your business and your staff of the first lockdown and even the second lockdown?
The initial lockdown was about 2.5 months, and we own two restaurants, and we decided to only open one of them for the limited takeout. We did about 5% of our estimated sales in takeouts. So it affected us. We only had 2 staff members on out of the approximate 40 that we employ through both establishments.
And Darius, you started something called Reopen Minnesota Coalition. Why did you start that? I assume that you're working with a lot of businesses like Lisa, but what was the impetus behind starting it? Because you're not a small business owner yourself even, right?
Yeah, I'm not. Back in May, there were a lot of businesses like Lisa's that they were really struggling. As she said, there was 2.5 months or so that they were shut down. And there was no end in sight because our governor had not given much insight into his plans for the future. So they didn't know if they were going to be locked down another week, another 6 months. There was not much information coming from the governor's administration. So there was a lot of businesses, particularly on social media. These owners were saying, "Hey, I'm desperate. My employees are desperate. How about we just open up and provide for these, these businesses, the employees, the communities?" And a few of us saw an opportunity to help organize that effort and use social media as a positive force. A lot of times it gets a lot of negative flack, but there's an opportunity for it to help provide an organizational voice for so many of these businesses that are not really, we have a lot of rural businesses, a lot of rural restaurants and bars. They don't know a lot. They're not connected across the state, and there's not one entity, not one organization that brings them all together. So we felt like that was an opportunity that we could fill.
And Lisa, what was it that made you decide to open after, like I said earlier, complying for all of those months?
When the second shutdown came out, it was assumed that we would be looking at another 2 to 3 month shutdown. And we shut down for a little while, and then we weren't willing to do it. Our staff was coming into the Christmas season. They needed money. We had people reaching out saying, "Is there anything you can do to help us? We need to work." And we weren't going to do it again. We were going to stand up and fight. And I had started reaching out to some different people and realized that there were other restaurants across the state that felt the same way we did. So when Reopen Minnesota came across with what they were going to do, we thought it was a good way to open everyone up at the same time.
So Darius, how many businesses are you working with?
Well, I guess we've had, to some extent or another, 150 to 200 that were very interested. As Lisa said, some of them may not have opened in reality when it came down to it. The pressure got pretty significant, both from certain loud voices in the community who were pretty negative, as well as the threats coming out of the Attorney General's office. But as far as who actually opened, I would estimate about 50 or 60 that opened, as well as a lot of ones that are a lot more quietly opening, or maybe even stayed open the whole time and never got caught, that we're not even aware of, that we've heard of through the grapevine.
So what was your reaction, Lisa? What happened after you opened, from your customers and from other quarters?
Our reaction to our customers and the messages that we received in support throughout the state and the country and even the world was overwhelming. I was flooded with words of support, and people were so proud that there were some businesses that were willing to open and defy the unconstitutional orders. And there was also a big group of people that were not in support of that. And we received death threats. We received thousands of messages that were horrible to us and our staff and our business. And we were vandalized by an extreme leftist group. Really hateful words on our entire building. And so people definitely have an opinion on whether we should have opened or not. And the people that have supported us. I can't even begin to thank everyone that reached out. And we're still getting messages from people across the country that are now hearing our story and just saying, "Thank you for taking this fight."
And Darius, are these similar reactions that you heard from your other businesses, both the positive and the negative?
Oh yeah, we've definitely heard plenty of negative. I would say the vast majority of what we've seen is very positive. As Lisa mentioned, a lot of these businesses chose to go public primarily because they wanted the support of the community as well, their local community as well as the state as a whole. And that way we could promote them and drive business to them. But there are obviously a fair amount of people who are pretty negative towards this movement, and I personally have received death threats. So it's a two-edged sword opening up. You have to take the good with the bad, but it's been, generally speaking, the feedback we've gotten from the business owners that have chosen to open has been so overwhelmingly positive. They were able to provide a little bit of income to a lot of these employees that had been stuck without any income for so long, particularly during the holidays as they're trying to provide for their families. A lot of single parents, they're trying to provide for their families. So that was one of the main messages that we wanted to focus on, was this is an opportunity to provide some peace and prosperity for these employees and these owners at a time that's been a very dark year.
And Lisa, were you surprised by this reaction? Did you know what would happen?
No, I had no idea how many people it was going to affect and how strong people were going to feel about it. I thought we were just going to open up and see all of our regulars, and they were going to come in and have beers and be happy that they got to see their favorite staff. And we had more than our few regulars at our restaurant, and the looks on people's faces were just so blessed. Every single person that I spoke with said to us, just thank you for letting us feel normal. And people were just really happy to be able to feel normal in a time of our nation that people are just not feeling normal, and they can't see the smiles on people's faces. They can't feel like they can talk to someone without having them feel like they're going to give them this virus. And people were just so blessed that they felt normal. We had people from all over the state coming in support for us. The business that we got made our staffs be able to have Christmas with their family, and our staff was able to pay their bills.
And Darius, what's the main complaint? What argument are you presenting to the governor?
Well, there's multiple ones, but mostly, particularly, it's just not fair or equitable that these businesses are singled out as targets when we have so many examples. I mean, you can look at all over society, so many other businesses, much bigger, much more full of people that are not targeted, and they're open. I mean, some of the large big box stores, the hardware stores, the grocery stores, the Targets, they're packed full of people, huge capacity limits. They can pack a lot of people in there, and yet they're allowed to be open. And like Lisa mentioned earlier, there's the whole issue that the contact tracing that this state has done has driven a lot of the skepticism towards bars and restaurants. And the target that's been put on their back is because of those contact tracing questions, which are really one-sided and really skew the data. So we don't believe it's fair that these places have to be shut down, particularly with no compensation given or such limited compensation. When they did get around to giving relief funds, it was pretty much a joke as far as the amount. But they have effectively, the government, our governor has effectively used eminent domain to take away their property without giving them compensation. So they are not allowed to use it to provide for themselves and provide for their families and their employees.
And can you explain, Darius, how is the contact tracing questions, how is that skewed?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I don't have the questions in front of me, but when someone tests positive, the state calls them to find out where they've been, and they have a list of contact tracing questions. It's generally the same list. And on that list, one of the first ones that they ask is, what bar or restaurant have you been to in the period of time where you might have been positive? They ask that immediately. That's a big one to ask. They were even asking it during the time when all these bars and restaurants were closed down. What they do not ask is, what Walmart have you been to? Have you been to a Walmart at all, much less maybe 10 times this week? That question never comes up. So obviously, by that very nature, even if we don't understand the reasons for it, but it skews the data.
So what is the state saying the role of restaurants is in spreading the virus in the community?
They're saying that we contributed to 2% of the rest of COVID cases in Minnesota, but they only asked targeted questions. So that number is a lot less than 2%. And like Darius said, they're not asking what big box stores are going. The casinos are open right now at 50% occupancy, and they're also allowed to have their restaurants open. That question's not being asked. The Minneapolis airports are allowed to have their restaurants and their bars open at capacity.
So Lisa, what's your current legal status right now? Where are things at?
We are in our appeal process right now for our we were found in contempt of court, and we have a temporary injunction on us. We're in our appeals process. We have hearings with the Minnesota Department of Health to suspend or revoke our liquor or our beer, our food service license, and also with the AGED to suspend or possibly revoke our liquor license for 5 years.
So what will you do if they revoke your licenses?
Not sure. We're going to keep fighting. We know that we're not wrong in this. We know that we've been targeted unfairly. We know that we've been discriminated as an industry in our state, and discrimination is unconstitutional. An executive order is unconstitutional, and we know how the law reads, and we're going to keep fighting until we win. Because what the governor and what Ellison did to us was unconstitutional, it was unfair, and it was discriminatory towards our industry.
So do you think this might go all the way to the Supreme Court? Have you talked about that?
I told my lawyer, I told him that we wanted to go to the state appeals court, and he said that was the next step. And I said, if we lose there, we're taking it to the Supreme Court. And he said it was going to take a long time. And I said, they take a restaurant, we got nothing but time. So we're going to fight it all the way, because what they did to our industry is not fair.
What if this comes to jail? Have you thought of that possibility, and what are you prepared to do?
If the state shuts us down again, we'll stay open. And if I have to go to jail, that's what we're going to do. I was surprised the last time. I was surprised that I wasn't threatened with arrest. Well, I was threatened with arrest by the executive order, and they just fined us heavily. But yeah, I was surprised that I did not go to jail. I was expecting it. And honestly, there's no social media in jail, so I'd have a couple days break.
There you go. There's the positive angle to it.
The positive. I can sit and read a book and stay off of social media.
All right, Darius, any final words from you?
We just hope that this is the end of the lockdowns. A lot of these owners initially thought there's no way that the state would do this, would terrorize their own small businesses like this for so many months. And then we thought, well, at least once you see the desperation of these businesses, that they would relent, and that the Attorney General and the governor would have a heart. But as we've seen, we've not detected any heart in either of those gentlemen. They seem to be intent on punishing these businesses to the full extent that they're allowed to. We're grateful that a lot of the local law enforcement in a lot of these locations have declined to get involved. They do not believe that the governor has the authority to do what he's been doing, and so they come out to these businesses and educate, but beyond that, they step aside. So it's a growing, one of those things that it's new ground being broken in this, because we've never seen anything like this in this country, and so it's no one quite knows how far some of this is going to have to be taken. I think the public, the national media, a lot of them are realizing a lot of these lockdowns. Even Governor Cuomo in New York has just recently admitted that locking down businesses indefinitely is just not good policy going forward. It's destroying these businesses. It's destroying the economy. It's destroying lives, ultimately.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, Minnesota isn't the only state where there are constitutional challenges to lockdowns. In fact, across the country, there are law enforcement officers who have decided not to enforce Governor Governor imposed measures citing the Bill of Rights. Our next guest is one reason why this might be the case. Joining us is Sheriff Richard Mack. He founded an organization called Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. Sheriff, welcome.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed the end of your last guest. I don't know the guy's name who was talking, but he was talking about law enforcement standing down. And that's exactly what our organization teaches sheriffs and peace officers across the country to do. We should not be enforcing tyranny.
So that was what I was going to ask you first. How does your organization work? What does it do?
Well, we've been around since 2011. I've actually been professing this for the last 25, 30 years, ever since when I was sheriff in Southeast Arizona in Graham County. And anybody can look this up. Just Google MAC VUS. I became the first sheriff in American history to sue the federal government, take it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and win a landmark case for local autonomy and state sovereignty. And so it's been ever since then that we've been trying. I guess I would compare myself to Paul Revere. We're just trying to wake people up to what's really going on. And I believe law enforcement has been improperly trained for the last, well, probably forever, at least the last 75 years, that our job is to enforce all laws, and that we're here to fill up the prisons with all the drug dealers and potheads and whatever we can do. And lamentably, we now have the highest rate of incarceration in the free world, anywhere in the entire world. The freest nation in the world has the most prisoners. And I don't think that is a good thing. I think that that's a sign of a real serious problem. And we all need to take a look at our drug laws enforcement and the drug war and the failure of the drug war. And we can't do that. We can't address prison reform if we don't address drug reform enforcement. And so we've been training our peace officers and our sheriffs, and we have a meeting coming up on the 22nd in Washington State, where we're going to be training and reinforcing a lot of good sheriffs and peace officers out there in Yakima. And then the end of this month, we're going to be out in Minnesota, as you just alluded to, helping business owners get out from underneath the dictatorial thumb of their state health department and their governor, and realize that Cuomo has finally woke up, and a lot of the other governors need to do the same. This is not right. Let's put it this way. Thomas Paine, in his American Crisis, at the time of the Revolutionary War, wrote a couple of pamphlets, Common Sense and the American Crisis. And in it, he said, quote, "Britain with its army to enforce her tyranny," end quote. I'm wondering if we have been manipulated, law enforcement has been manipulated into enforcing the tyranny of today. We do not have to do that. It is our choice. It's police discretion, and it's our choice. But we've all sworn an oath in God's name of allegiance to the United States Constitution. And that is required by the supreme law of the land. It is required by Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution. The Founding Fathers made it a requirement for all of us in public service to swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution, and thereby all three branches of government are doing what? Protecting, defending, upholding, and preserving God-given rights and our natural rights that we were born with. And thereby we perpetuate liberty. We've forgotten that, and we've gotten off track, and so the CSPOA is all about that. I also want to say that there is a county in Arizona, northwest part of the state, Mojave County, has already declared itself a sanctuary for the Second Amendment. Now they're really pushing there. The patriots of Mojave County are really pushing a proclamation and a referendum, if you will, to start making counties constitutional sanctuaries. And so where we could actually say to the world and to the rest of the country, we must be enforcing the Constitution. We must be living by the Constitution. And I'm telling you, I believe in my heart of hearts that that is the solution for America today, and it will remain and keep us peaceful and also create a very effective change in getting us back to the path the founders established for America. I want to take my hat off and really let them know those patriots in Mojave County are doing a great job, and we really hope that they will have success in making their county, which already it should be, because that's what all of us have sworn to do in government. It should be, but to reinforce that we are a constitutional county. What a great measure that is, and a great example.
So, Sheriff, let's bring this back to the pandemic and tell us what you're telling sheriffs to do in relation to pandemic and enforcing different edicts and measures imposed by governors that you seem to think are unconstitutional. Can you explain what you're telling them?
Yes, and a lot of them are telling the country the same thing. We have about 25 sheriffs in California that are standing against Governor Newsom. Regrettably, we have some other sheriffs that are trying to just kind of stay apathetic and stay out of it. And then we have a few sheriffs also that are going along with it. And what we tell and train sheriffs to do is look at what you swore to do when you took your job. And can you abdicate the fulfillment of your oath to someone else? Can you really say to your constituents, well, I have to enforce the law? Well, first of all, sheriffs, Governor Newsom cannot make law. Only the legislature can make law. So if he comes out with some proclamation, and there is some legitimacy to some emergency orders, like in time of a natural disaster or even a ubiquitous virus, you can make up some rules for that. But you cannot violate the Constitution. You cannot destroy America while you're pretending to take care of all of us. I want to see a government that pursues the virus without destroying our economy. I want to see us pursue a virus without destroying Disneyland, without destroying Hawaii, without destroying our culture of freedom here in this country. And for any governor to come out and say, I have the authority to do this. I have the authority to tell you to do anything you want, or to force you to do whatever we want you to do. That was never meant to be in America. In fact, we fought the Revolutionary War to stop such things. In fact, let me tell you the name of the law that the British Parliament and King George III established. It was called the Declaratory Act. And indeed, Thomas Paine assails that law in his American Crisis also, saying that the law actually said, we can legislate you in all matters whatsoever. And then Thomas Paine actually compared that to slavery. And he says, if government can legislate our lives and do whatever they want, then that is slavery. Because if they can legislate our lives and do anything they want to us, isn't that a slave master? Isn't that putting us back on the plantation? And I have a question to every governor and mayor and anyone else going along with this tyranny that is supposedly because they're taking care of us. I don't buy into that. We're going to force you to let us take care of you. And who do we trust in government to do that anyway? Because the founding fathers, Jefferson especially, said, guard with extreme jealousy anyone who approaches this jewel of liberty, but bind them down with the chains of the Constitution. Well, this is still a time. In fact, in an emergency, where is it that we get to destroy liberty? And as a matter of fact, let me compare that to one other pandemic that we've had in this country, a very legitimate one. In the last 10 years, over 450,000 Americans have died because of opioid abuse. And those have been approved by the Federal Food and Drug Administration. Those have been approved by local state health departments and other legislators. Those have been approved by the United States Congress, who oversees the FDA regulations and budget for them. And yet we never shut anybody down. We didn't even stop bringing in opioids. We didn't even do anything to regulate opioids to where they're not getting on the streets. And yet nobody shut down. Nobody really cared. We've never shut down because of heart disease. We keep letting people go to Dairy Queen, and we kill millions every year because of smoking, alcoholism, and obesity. Nobody ever got shut down. We never made cigarettes illegal. We tried to make alcohol illegal once back in the early 1900s, and it didn't work. And so we repealed that horrific amendment that said no more alcohol in America. And who kept drinking during all that time? The legislators that made that law. And it's still happening today. We have all sorts of self-appointed dictators that have shown themselves to be complete hypocrites, which means they don't really believe this stuff that they're spewing. And yet they want to continue to force us to close our businesses, not be able to take care of our families. I got news for Congress. One, we don't want you to take care of us. We want you to leave us alone and let us be free. But the other one is this. You're pretending to the American people that every 7 or 8 months, if you send us $1,200, we're going to be okay. Who could survive with that? I don't support any of that, believe me. But every 7 or 8 months, you send us $1,200 each, and that's going to be a stimulus. What's it going to stimulate? That'll last how long? And that's how stupid all of this is. Even though they're trying to take care of us improperly and unconstitutionally, they don't have the authority to start giving everybody money like that. And what is the other message with that? Deficit spending doesn't matter. We're already $30 trillion in debt, and we're just going to add more, and it doesn't matter if we spend money we don't have.
So Sheriff Mack, let me ask you something.
Yeah,
what are you advising that sheriffs and other law enforcement officers do in the face of all of this?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry I got carried away there.
I understand. You're passionate.
I'll tell you, there's so much to talk about in this whole thing. But nobody has a right to shut us down, suspend the Constitution, and suspend liberty. Once lost, it's almost impossible to get back. But we train sheriffs to especially just make a phone call. Just tell your local health department you're not going to allow them to do it. Not that we're just going to stand down, but we're not going to stand for anybody to come in and do it in my county, and I not defend the people in their freedom to exercise their pursuit of happiness, exercise their liberty. And so we tell them to do exactly what hundreds of sheriffs are already doing across the country. Keep the churches open, defend the churches, stand in the way. The key word here is interpose. And interpose means we stand in the way. It's kind of like a basketball move. On defense, if they move, you move. You don't have to beat them up. You don't have to be violent. In fact, we absolutely detest all violence. I don't care if it comes from the left or the right or anywhere in between. We detest and preach against all violence. We totally support Martin Luther King when he said, we all have a moral obligation to obey just laws. We also, conversely, have a moral obligation to disobey unjust laws. So we definitely teach the sheriffs that people practicing civil disobedience, that we should be standing there next to them and helping them and supporting them. We should be standing in front of Larvita, her business called what is it?
Alibi Drinkery?
Yeah, Haven's Garden.
Oh, okay.
And we should be standing there in front of her restaurant, in front of her gym, and any other businesses in this country. And we should be saying, you're not shutting this down. You're not arresting her. You're not charging her $1,000 a day for trying to make a living and taking care of her family. Principles that are so fundamental to the American dream, we now have government destroying, again, all in the name of taking care of us. So we want our sheriffs to stand strong. We don't want them just to stand down. We want them to make sure no other bureaucrat is trying to destroy the liberty of any individual. Forcing people to wear a mask and then citing them in or arresting them? Really?
So what's
Give me a break. Come on.
what's the reception been like with the sheriffs? How many people have you trained? How interested are they in getting your training?
Well, we had a great training on September 30th in Virginia. We had about 75 sheriffs there, but we also had a mayor from Pennsylvania. And I will say he happened to be a Black American, and he was also a Democrat. And we totally invite everybody from every walk of life and all politics. We actually detest partisan politics, which is destroying our country. But we've, over the last 10 years, we've probably trained about 700. But it's a constant thing because these are people are always retiring, or they leave office, or they pass away. And so it's like herding cats. You just have to keep repeating and keep working. And we're calling sheriffs and other public officials every day, trying to answer the calls from their constituents. Hey, can you talk to my sheriff? And I say, look, we want the citizens talking to their sheriffs. They work for you. They don't work for me. But I will definitely follow up. And certainly I'm calling sheriffs all the time. First of all, we want to help these sheriffs, and we want them to know that they have a support group known as the CSPOA. And by the way, everybody can join. You can join. Citizens have got to be a part of this movement. And so we're getting a lot of support from citizens who want to take America back in a peaceful manner. This is peaceful, it's effective, it's constitutional, and it's right.
Are you getting any pushback also?
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah. And so right now I'm writing an article called "Tyranny Like Hell is Not Easily Conquered." That's also another quote from Thomas Paine. And so I'm trying to remind sheriffs, are you going to seriously tell me that you're on the side of shutdown, forced mass, shutting down churches? And are you going to be like the sheriff out in Florida who actually arrested Pastor Rodney Howard Brown for simply conducting a church service? Well, his case has been dismissed. At least we had a judge smarter than that sheriff. But all of us are supposed to be upholding and defending the Constitution. Why would we think that some order from a governor that isn't even law, that would supersede the Bill of Rights, supersede my oath of office? And so how many people do we have committing perjury in this country who don't keep their oath? Once you swear an oath, it's your job and your duty to fulfill it and to keep your word. You don't get to say, well, the legislature's passed a law and they made me change my mind. In the Nuremberg trials after World War II, the officers who were participated in the genocide of Jews and other people as well, it wasn't just Jews, it was many other groups, but mostly the Jews. Those officers were found guilty, and most of them were executed, at least at the Nuremberg trials. And you know what they used as a defense? I was just following orders. You can't prosecute me or punish me for following orders. Well, they said that didn't fly, and it was not a valid excuse, because we should exercise our own moral authority in the execution of the laws. And I just got interviewed 2 days ago by a German newspaper about all this, and I said the people of Germany should have raised up and stopped Adolf Hitler. And I'm sorry, but we the people are in charge of this government. No, I'm not sorry. It's a great part of our republic. But we're in charge of this government. And the Declaration of Independence says that we can throw off government when it becomes destructive of life, liberty, and property. And so I'm giving a solution that is peaceful. We don't need to fight another revolution. I don't want to fight another revolution. We already fought it. We already got our freedom with blood, sweat, and tears. Let's get back to those principles. And I'm telling you right now, if the sheriffs of this country and the rest of the law enforcement in this country will stand for liberty, not just stand down, but stand for liberty and protect the rights of our citizens, we will take America back. I don't care what Biden and Harris do. We can establish pockets of freedom all over this country, just like Mojave County Patriots are doing. And we can create pockets of constitutional counties and states, and we can take America back, county by county, one sheriff at a time. And I urge all of you to be part of this solution. Go to cspoa.org.
Okay, great. We have to wrap up in 1 minute, but I just want you to give us one concrete example of how a sheriff that you trained implemented your training and saw results.
Sheriff Brad Rogers from Elkhart County, Indiana. He had the FDA coming in and doing spot checks on a farmer there who was doing a dairy farm. Finally, after the 7th or 8th time, he called the sheriff and said, I'm tired of these people bothering me. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not a criminal. And the sheriff told the FDA to get out or he would arrest him. They threatened to arrest him. We provided a response to them. The FDA left that man alone. And God bless Sheriff Brad Rogers, who is now a county commissioner in Elkhart County. God bless the people who stand for liberty.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us, Sheriff.
You're welcome.
Next, we have America Q&A.
The really nice thing about freedom of speech, right? The thing that makes freedom of speech work in a society is the fact that we don't decide whose speech we like.
We all have our own opinion. We all have our own values, our own morals, and we should be able to talk about those things.
No, it is not. This is one enticing people to go do something bad. It's against the law.
Our rules, and everyone is subject to any social media's rules.
I think they should just completely ban him. That's like a form of impeachment too, from social media.
Freedom of speech was not meant to be used as a weapon.
I think it's appalling. It's a slippery slope to go down when public media has this much power over our lives. It's really disturbing.
I don't think it's a good idea. I think that basically, if you trust rationality, you should let anybody say what they want.
I mean, where do you stop after that? What's next?
So I have mixed feelings related to that question. I think in general, banning someone from expressing their opinions is a violation of free speech unless those messages are of hatred or potentially inciting violence, although I'm not certain that his statements have gone either way there.
America's kind of all about like expressing how you feel, and though people may not agree with what he has to say, I feel like he should be able to express what he thinks.
There's so many other people out there with different platforms that are currently don't get banned, and they're much more disruptive and much more of an issue than Donald Trump is.
Absolutely. I mean, he is our president of the United States. I mean, the fact that he cannot speak to the nation that we have elected him is just a disgrace.
It does violate the freedom of speech, but his speech has done a lot of stuff to sort of spark kind of hatred. So I see why they would want to take it away from him.
I think it opens the door for a lot of censorship.
Those are like privately owned companies, so the First Amendment doesn't really apply. They don't have to invite you into their store if they don't like what you're talking about.
Since the business is private, they have a certain legal reasons to maybe block someone's account.
I think that social media should be available to all.
And that's all for today's show. Thank you so much for watching The Nation Speaks, and join us every Saturday, 11 a.m. to noon Eastern. And from all of us here, have a great week.
Hi, we're happy to announce that you can also catch us on cable TV now. Millions of households already choose us as one of their trusted news sources, and you can too. You can watch us in Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, and many other cities as well. And if your system doesn't carry NTD yet, you can just give them a quick call and request NTD on your cable provider. Thank you for watching. See you next time.